A dark, brooding, terrifying warrior with incredible strength is a fun archetype. It's really fun to look at, it's really fun to consider, and, of course, it's really fun to play. However, it can be difficult to do it sometimes. There are a lot of different ways of going about role-playing these types of characters, and a lot of different ways that people like to do it, but I've seen a lot of people get stuck on it, and it is something that I would actually like to be able to get into. How do you play that type of character? The warrior who uses fear and intimidation in order to strike terror into their enemies. Well, of course, let's talk about that. Player Roll is a proud affiliate of 1985 Games, who is currently distributing their Dungeon Craft tiles, which are incredible. They sent me some of their sets that were from their Kickstarter campaign, and they're amazing, perfect for tossing in a bag and using for a one-shot. For all those times that a Dungeon Master just caught on the fly and doesn't know what to do, the Dungeon tiles are there to honestly save you a ton of time. If you want to check these out, or the rest of the incredible products that they have, please check the link in the description to help the channel out and get yourself some cool things. Anyways, back to the video. Before I get into the video, I want to apologize. I've been feeling pretty under the weather recently, and so while I still am recording and still want to get this out, if my appearance feels a little, or so does my energy, that's why. But I'm doing my best to keep doing this for you guys because, well, of course I love doing it. So, with that being said, let's jump into the video. We're talking about how to play a Dark Knight this video, and I know the first thing that comes to your mind when I say that is, of course, well, Batman.
The Batman.
Because, you know, The Dark Knight Rises, the whole Dark Knight trilogy, The Dark Knight. And to be honest, Batman is pretty much the quintessential archetype for this character. He's perfect, he is brooding, he is dark, he is powerful, he strikes terror into his enemies, and really, that's what sums up this character archetype. Somebody who's powerful, terrifying, hits hard and fast, and uses fear as a main weapon in order to cause their enemies to hesitate so that they can come forward and overcome any odds. If it is 1 versus 50, but all 50 of them are afraid of you, you have the advantage. And that's the type of character that a lot of people want to play. But it's difficult to do in D&D because, well, frankly, it's really difficult to play into fear unless you have the frightened effect, right? I mean, frightened is a type of ability that gets used. It's a status effect. And if you don't have that ability, well, it's hard to roleplay striking fear into everybody.
And how am I supposed to strike fear into the hearts of the wicked with this thing?
Especially if your DM is not comfortable role-playing the NPCs that you guys are fighting. So this will be part DM, part player, as most of my archetype videos are. But how to come together to create this archetype. So let's go. First thing, let's talk about fear, because I just mentioned it. 1, this is for the DMs. Listen closely. Frightened does not have to be an effect that is only used through mechanics. Now I know that sounds a little bit weird, but let me explain. Frightened is an effect that can be used outside of magical effects. A class ability can create a frightened effect, a character ability can create a frightened effect, or a spell can create a frightened effect, but you don't have to have any of those. If your player does something terrifying enough, it is okay to have the enemy roll a wisdom saving throw to see if they're frightened. Frightened is just an effect to show what happens when somebody is scared of somebody else. And yes, it can be magical, but it can also be just straight up, hey, I just chunked an entire boulder at that barbarian and he took it forehead on and cracked it in half. Maybe I'm a little afraid of him right now. And that's something really important, because when people want to play this archetype, they want to strike fear into their opponents. They want to make people terrified of them, because it's a huge part of the Dark Knight archetype. And so it is something to play into a factor. Intimidation is a huge thing for them. And for the players, if you want to be intimidating, here's the #1 thing you need to do. Do not let your character be shaken. Now, this doesn't mean never be shaken. Nobody is immune to constantly being unafraid. Everybody feels fear. But for Batman, that was a core part of his character, wasn't it? Being afraid. Batman started and became Batman because he was afraid. And for those of you who don't know that or don't know the backstory of Batman, what happened was he decided to choose to be Batman because he was afraid of bats.
That's frightened me.
It struck fear into him, and he realized that was a weapon and a tool to be used. And so he learned to conquer his fear over bats. He learned to conquer his fear over everything in order to be able to fight against these villains. One of the main villains of Batman, Scarecrow, exemplifies this.
Crane?
No, Scarecrow.
Because Scarecrow creates a toxin which inhibits fear. No, it causes fear. It creates fear. I apologize. It enhances the fear you already feel. And Batman is able to overtake Scarecrow because he is willing to face his fear heads on. He is not immune to his fear. That is important. But he is aware of it and knows how to fight it because of that. And so fear is a huge portion of this type of archetype. And so you want to make sure that you come across unshakable, because if you're unshakable, they'll begin to fear you because it seems like you have no fear. And so you roleplay that by in combat. When something happens, when something hits you, always roleplay it as if you're taking it head on. Yes, you might take a ton of damage, get knocked down, and break a rib. Okay, your character's gonna feel that. Don't try and pretend that you don't. Batman feels that when he takes those blows. But what is more terrifying? Somebody who gets hit and just doesn't take any damage whatsoever, that's boring. Somebody who gets hit, takes a ton of damage, breaks a rib, goes flying across the room, stands back up, snaps it back into place, and keeps staring you head on. Internally, your character's probably screaming, okay? Probably feeling that pain, and it's, oh, okay, breathe in, breathe out. But for the enemy, they're facing somebody who's not afraid to be hurt, but just wants to hurt you, and that's terrifying. So make sure to roleplay fear. Make sure to be unshakable and inflict fear onto them.
I'm Batman.
But then there's the mechanic side of things. There's a lot of classes that can go well into this archetype, alright? There's a ton. And people really like a specific one, Vengeance Paladin. Vengeance Paladin is meant to be this type of archetype. Your Daredevils, your Punishers, your Batmans, the terrifying vigilante who's coming after you, nailing you down, and is going to take you out, and probably instill a ton of fear in you while you do it. So Vengeance Paladin is an awesome way to go about it, and I frankly love it. I've played a Vengeance Paladin before, very fun. But it's not the only way. The main thing you need to consider here is that when you're playing this archetype, the main thing you want to do is be able to hit hard, fast, and capable. You want to be able to hit one person in particular to cause as much damage as possible to be able to look at everybody else and say, who else wants some? We've all seen Batman take on tons of people at once, and that's great, that's fun, that's fine. But you don't have to necessarily be able to take on everybody at once. Technically, you just have to take down one and look at everybody else and ask them who wants to take a chance to be able to experience what that guy just felt. And that's a great start. And so there's a lot of different ways you could do that. Barbarian, fighter, monk, you know, most of the martial classes are going to do a great way. But frankly, a lot of the spellcasters can do this too in a much more unique way, because you can cast those spells on one particular person and then look at everybody else and say, who wants what I just did to them? I just disintegrated them, who else wants it? Now keep in mind, you are in a D&D world, and if your enemies are experienced in being able to fight against spellcasters, they're going to know about the concept of spell slots, okay? So spellcasters do have innately a disadvantage for this sort of thing, but they don't know what level of a spellcaster you are, they don't know how many spell slots you've used, so you still can use it. But the main thing you want to do is hit one person hard and fast and look at everybody else. And DMs, if somebody just gets annihilated and everybody around them is the same power level as that person who just got annihilated, it is perfectly okay to have every single one of the NPCs in this combat look up and go, oh crap. It is totally okay to have them afraid in that moment. Does it mean they're just going to run away? Of course not. But consider that and play into it. There are many times in my campaign where one person just gets annihilated. I have specifically stated that my villains will not attack them. For example, I had one combat encounter where the ranger in my party had this giant bear, and the bear mauled somebody. And so the enemies did want to get to the ranger, but I specifically stated they're not going to attack a bear. There's no reason they want to do that. And so they pick different targets. It doesn't mean they just run, but most of your NPCs are going to be human. Roleplay does not stop in combat. Play into that because it can be very fun and create a more unique and interesting encounter as a whole. So that's one thing that you could do. Instill that fear, nail somebody down, and play those specific archetypes. And if you could do all that, it really should be a very fun character that you could play, and you can try and emulate that perfect Dark Knight thing. But keep in mind, the Dark Knight does not have no emotions. The Dark Knight has a lot of emotions. This archetype can oftentimes be a gruff, emotionless character, but that's not true. Usually, they just try and deny their own emotions, which can create a very interesting character. So do all that, and you should be able to play a pretty interesting Dark Knight at your table. So go out into the world, make it your own, you beautiful bastards. Don't forget to have a great day, and never forget to play your role. A huge shout out to all those divine bastards over on our Patreon that helped make this video happen. Big D the Cool Guy, BKBW, Diet Blue, Duplicolor, Sassy Productions, Sorit, Supreme Court, Talia Martin, Tenai, Void Mystic, and Volpe Nico. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without our patrons, and we are very thankful for your continued support. You guys are the absolute best, and I will never take your support for granted.